Volgende spreker kondig ik met zeer veel genoegen aan. Een van onze zuidenburen, Tuur Demeester, woonachtig in Brugge. En Tuur heb ik voor het eerst zien spreken op een Bitcoin-conferentie afgelopen september. Zeer gegrepen door zijn verhaal, meer vanuit de economische kant, waar veel expertise van hem zit. Ook echt een early Bitcoin adapter. En ik geef hem met veel genoegen het woord. Tuur Demeester.
I decided to talk in English today to spare you my very obscure Flemish accent or dialect. It is actually very obscure in Bruges. I lived in Amersfoort for a year in Utrecht as well, and I really had to kind of relearn my Dutch. But anyway, I want to start by inviting you all to be very skeptical about everything you're going to hear, everything you have heard. Check all the facts by all means. But at the same time, I want to invite you to dare to be very open about what's happening here, because it's truly history in the making, absolutely. I want to tell a story today, and it's the story of a gentleman called Charles W. Morgan. Charles Morgan was an American investor and entrepreneur living in the early 19th century. He was active in the energy trade of the time, better known as whale hunting. That's what he did. And at the time, people called the whaling industry or whale oil truly the substance that lit the world. And that was very true in many respects. Almost every household had candles made out of whale oil. Almost every household had oil lamps that were running on this whale oil. And it was actually a very substantial improvement from before, because candles made out of spermaceti, which was derived from this whale oil, they were much sturdier, they had a brighter light. Actually, when you talk about lumens today, have a torchlight or something, and it says X amount of lumens, that was actually based on a spermaceti candle. And finally, also, these candles had quite a pleasant odor, which was a huge improvement over the old way of doing things, which was using animal fat to create candles. So when Mr. Morgan got involved in the whaling industry, it had been growing for over 100 years. It was a very, very established industry. It was a very profitable industry as well, to the extent even that the government had gotten involved and had quite tightly regulated it. So in a way, you could also call it an entrenched industry. So over time, Mr. Morgan built a small fleet of 7 whaling ships going about the oceans. Often these trips would last over 4 years, just really tremendous adventures. And in 1841, he decided to add an 8th ship. It was a 351-ton wooden ship named after who else? Himself, the Charles W. Morgan. And of course, so they set sail and a new journey began. But it didn't take too long for Mr. Morgan to start becoming a bit worried about what was happening in the whaling industry, because the space had become very competitive, very, very competitive. And also because many more people were hunting these whales, it was harder to find them. So it became more expensive to trace the whales and to bring them back home and harvest all the oil. So that's why in 1847, Charles Morgan decided to start selling his ships. And in hindsight, he was very, very prescient, very forward-looking to do so, because 2 years later, just 2 years later, a Canadian geologist invented or found a way to take bituminous tar, which is what we know that's being used to build the roads and make plastics and all those things, and to derive a substance from it called kerosene, right? And that allowed people to light their oil lamps in a much cheaper fashion. And it only took a couple years before the whole world was using this very cheap substance called kerosene. And in 1850, another scientist found a way to take petroleum and to derive paraffin out of that, which of course we all still know is used to make very cheap and very efficient candles. So what happened in just a few years, this very established industry was completely decimated and in a way overrun by a new technological revolution. So of course, people active in the whaling industry didn't just lean back and start fiddling their thumbs and giving up. Of course not, because the petroleum industry actually had a lot of parallels to offer. For example, the process of refining, right? Whale oil had to be refined, as was the case with petroleum. The concept of depletion. Whales were being depleted, wells were being depleted. This was all very practical knowledge. Also, the process of discovery. It took a lot of effort to find and trace whales, just as much as it took a lot of effort and research and adventure to discover new oil wells. So a lot of parallels, and it shouldn't surprise us that historian Samuel Eaton made the following comment in 1866. Eaton said, "Many of the old whalemen have thrown aside the harpoon and have entered upon the business of selecting petroleum sites and locating petroleum wells with as much avidity as ever they pursued the monsters of the deep." Well, today, my friends, history is repeating itself. Of course, I'm talking about the parallels between the old financial industry and this new and rebellious cryptocurrency industry. There's a couple of parallels that I see between both industries, and I'm interested to hear what your thoughts on my thoughts right here. So the first parallel that I see is that the old fiat banking industry has been in existence for about 100 years, because really it truly came into existence with the advent of central banking in 1913. And of course, we all know it's a very entrenched industry, and it has been in a state of crisis since 2008. Another parallel that I see is the hunt. There is truly a hunt also happening in the world of finance, and this is the hunt for yield. It's the hunt for returns. And this seems to be a whale that's ever more scarce to find. Finding the next whale, when is it going to happen? Third parallel is that we're seeing technologies with vastly higher efficiencies that are making a lot of waves, and they're growing by leaps and bounds. And one example that I want to use to illustrate is that a couple months ago, there was a Bitcoin transaction that happened which had a value of over $100 million. And that transaction cleared in a matter of seconds. It didn't make use of any middlemen. It had zero transaction costs. It respected the privacy of all the participants, and it happened on a Sunday. So this new technology is not just a libertarian pipe dream. It's truly a technology that makes things a lot more efficient for the whole world. Another parallel that I'm seeing is that just like with petroleum in the 19th century, the challenger of the status quo today is an unlikely contender, right? Oil was always harvested in the oceans until in 1850, petroleum started to become harvested on land. So similarly, we're seeing the world of finance having a very particular, let's say, part of society being involved with it, and then all of a sudden there's a bunch of hackers that come up with a new protocol, and everything changes. Just like with petroleum, the new contender has no support from established intellectuals, right? There are no famous books or tracts or any of that from established thinkers that were lauding petroleum in 1850. Same is happening today. The contender today also is associated with scams and frauds and huge bankruptcies, just like what happened in early 19th century America with petroleum. Of course, we're also seeing violent price swings, incredible volatility happening, as was, of course, the case in the early days of petroleum. I mean, prices were all over the map. They would vary massively from week to week, and we had different prices in different locations, not even between continents, but within the same country, you could see very different prices depending on where you want to buy the oil. And finally, we're also seeing a range of products, a range of new products being offered that vary a lot in quality. Some of them are of supreme quality, some of them are of very questionable quality. And of course, I'm referring to altcoins and the like, also talking about the Bitcoin ecosystem, which is very, very diverse. It was the same thing with oil. I mean, oil is not just oil. Quality is very different from when it comes out of the ground, and then also you have to refine it. which can happen in a good way or in a bad way, and that really defines the quality of the final product. So now we understand as well why Standard Oil was called Standard Oil. It promised simply a fixed quality of oil after the distillation, the refinement, I mean. So in other words, cryptocurrency entrepreneurs today are operating in kind of a Wild West environment, just like the early days of petroleum. A final parallel that I'm seeing with this technological revolution comparing to that one in the 19th century is that cryptocurrency companies are beginning to snatch away the brightest minds in banking. I think that's truly happening, and it's only going to accelerate going forward. And it makes sense, right? It makes sense because there's a lot of skills that are very useful in cryptocurrency, and also the other way around, there's a lot of skills in the cryptocurrency environment that are very applicable and useful in traditional banking. Actually, I mean, it makes sense because we're all dealing with digital currency here, right? There is no doubt about that. So let me close with a couple of thoughts about what the challenge and what the opportunity is here going forward. Basically what we're seeing is that the upcoming cryptocurrency technologies, they've taken the game of money and banking to a new level. They've raised the bar for everyone. And that's going to have an impact on what customers are going to demand in the future, right? One of the first things that I see customers ask going forward is control and flexibility. In 2001, Steve Jobs climbed on a podium and announced that he was going to put 1,000 songs in your pocket. Remember that? That was the iPod. Well, that really raised the bar for MP3 players. After that, that was what people wanted. Well, I think going forward, what we're going to see is that people are going to want a bank in their pockets. And that's going to be the bar that is going to be set for the financial industry. Another thing that people are going to demand going forward is deposit banking with high transparency. It's not going to be enough that you give people a statement saying how much money they have on their account. It's not going to suffice to give them a piece of paper every year, an annual report stating how much money the bank has in total. No, people are going to want verifiable reserve audits. They're going to want to be able to verify themselves what is actually going on, what the situation really is, the financial situation. Another suggestion that I think is going to change going forward is a separation of the lending and borrowing market. Lending and borrowing brokerage, I think going forward is going to be a separate industry. That's what we're seeing in the cryptocurrency world. And of course, it makes sense because it should be directed to people that want to invest in the future, that want to lend out their money, and not necessarily to people who just want to store their money securely. Another change that's going to happen is that people are going to desire a 100% predictable monetary policy. People no longer will accept that they flip on their television and they have to listen to a man with a beard telling them what's going to happen next, how the interest rate is going to change, how financial policy is going to change. No, they're going to want predictability. And why? Because it's possible, right? I mean, if it's possible to have a money that has a predictable financial policy, why would you stick with this unpredictability? Another thing that people are going to want is robustness. They won't accept a central point of failure anymore going forward. Maybe today they do still, but my question is, what are they going to want after the next big banking crisis? My guess is they won't accept it anymore because there is an alternative. So this is the new reality we live in. And what an opportunity it represents, truly. For the first time in history, we're able to build a robust and low-cost financial system from which the entire world can benefit, right? Not just the 1 billion who's banked, but also the 5 billion who's still unbanked. And what an opportunity this represents for the Netherlands. Because right here, Bitcoin adoption is the highest in the world. There's a wealth of experience, knowledge, creativity, standing ready to make the leap and to take things to the next level. All this knowledge is present to make the Netherlands, to make the lowlands into the Silicon Valley of Money 2.0, to turn it into the Hong Kong of 21st century banking. Just like the Bank of Amsterdam was central for the Dutch golden century, cryptocurrency could be key for a new era of prosperity right here. So let us not be afraid of this revolution. Let us instead embrace it. Thanks.
Tuur, when did you start to get involved with Bitcoin?
I was traveling in Latin America, and my friends told me about Bitcoin in summer 2011, and then that was actually after the big bubble of when the price went to $1,000, and then there was a crash, and it declined to, I think, down to about $2.50. So after that, I decided it was time to get involved, and me and my subscribers started investing at around $5. So
what a horrible time to start, yeah, because I mean, our previous speaker started at 27 cents. You were really late to the game.
Extremely late.
Yeah.
Tuur, one question. You've been traveling all around the world to attend Bitcoin conferences and to meet people to talk about cryptocurrency and everything.
Right.
What is the main thing you have noticed so far? What have changed from the beginning since you started doing that to, for instance, now? Because
what has changed?
Yeah, what has changed?
Oh, so much. Really, the whole environment has changed. If you look at who was involved in the early days, we're literally talking about hackers, software developers, people that could read the code, right? I felt really like at a loss there. I felt like I was the strange one out. I couldn't read the code and check whether everything was the way people said it was. And look where we are now. This is a conference sponsored by one of the major banks in Holland. It's been tremendous. People always say that Bitcoin is developing at a pace about 10 times the pace of regular industries. I think that's kind of true. It's going incredibly fast.
So why, now that you've been busy with that for a couple of years, I see you on Russia Today. How did you get on Russia Today? It is really something, because they are completely crazy about Bitcoin. They love Bitcoin, right? They see it as a sort of critical, critical analysis of the American system. So how did you get involved with them?
Yeah, Russia Today, they're the Russian state television, and of course, anything that might question or replace the dollar is something maybe to be excited about for them.
Very excited.
So, and they have a show called The Kaiser Report, and it's based in London, and I think Max Kaiser has been he's been talking about Bitcoin since 2011. So. Yeah, that's why.
So this is not your last speech, but your previous. There was one more speech you're going to do tomorrow, and then it's over. Then you're going to recharge the batteries. What does that mean?
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe it'll be one of those announcements where people, like with actors or I don't know who, say they're going to retire, and then all of a sudden a year later they're back. But yeah, I do want to take a break and focus more on the philosophy, which is something that's what I did previous to economics. So
this was just a little in between.
We'll see.
Must have been a nice
I'm still excited. I haven't sold any Bitcoins, and I'm still, of course, I'm going to follow it and perhaps make some more investments. But yeah, I'd like to take a break. And which is not to say that I'm still incredibly excited. This was all, this stuff.
Yeah. Thanks for your last speech, or your previous one, almost last speech. Thank you.
Thanks.